Hi, it's Cathy Cena with Tri-Cities Community TV in the beautiful offices of the Fountainhead Network here in Port Coquitlam. I'm here with an author who's going to share with us why her sister was held hostage for 41 hours in the 1970s. With me today is Margaret Franz, an author of the book Between Blade and Bullet. Welcome to our program today, and thank you for being with us. And this is a very interesting story. I'm really humbled to actually be interviewing you, and also would like to hear more about your reasons why you wrote this, and tell us a little bit about what happened in the 1970s with your sister.
I've always known that my sister, whose name was Mary,
Yes.
was an extraordinary woman. She was brave and in a way that I found totally awesome, in that she, even before this event, which I will tell you about, Mary, my sister, actually rescued a friend, a mutual friend we had, from drowning in the Arrow Lakes, not in the river, the actual Arrow Lakes River, but in the adjoining swampy area. And I was there on that day, and Mary literally dove into the water, pulled out my friend Amy, and dragged her to shore, and basically gave her artificial respiration, and she literally saved her life.
How old were you back then?
Mary was about 15.
15.
And I was 12.
And you were 12. So you knew, you watched your sister save another human's life. And as you said, she's very awesome. And this sort of, this act of hers, much later in life, let's say, you weren't surprised by it because you knew her fortitude and what she was going to put on the line for herself and Canada.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. The incident in question happened on June the 9th in 1975, and it lasted for 41 hours, and it involved a hostage taking. Mary was one of 15 classification officers who were what we would now refer to as institutional parole officers.
Okay.
So they were parole officers who actually worked within the gates of the prison.
They worked within the gates. Okay,
yes,
got it.
On the site of the prison grounds.
Okay.
And each one of those caseworkers or classification officers had a caseload of inmates who were resident at the institution, and it was their job to act as a liaison between the inmates and their families, or the inmates and the community, and basically they brought their questions and their concerns to their caseworker. And Mary was one of those caseworkers. At the time, she was one of only 3 women who were on this team of caseworkers. The other 12 were all men. Mary had a wonderful way about her. She brought to this particular position, which was the first job she held after she got her Master's of Social Work from UBC. So she was a registered social worker. But even before that, she had some very unique skills that she brought with her, and that was that she was a registered psychiatric nurse. And back in the day, all of the psychiatric nurses were trained at what they referred to as Essendale BC.
Right.
Which is the former name of the Riverview lands.
Yes.
Which of course now have been renamed again.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the land, the place of the great blue heron. I think that's the English translation of the indigenous name.
Yes.
And Mary trained at Essendale, and she graduated after 2 years, and then she stayed another year further. She continued to stay at Essendale. Then, at some point, she decided she was going to explore the other institutions that were related to developmentally delayed, and they lived in a very large complex up in Kamloops, past Kamloops, called Tranquille. And they were housed in what they called the Tranquille School for the mentally and physically disabled. Mary spent a year there. Then she decided that she was going to go to Toronto. And so she went across the country, and again, she nursed. She took her registered psychiatric nurse's skills to the largest institution of its kind in Toronto, and it was called Queen Street Mental Health Center. And so she basically nursed there for the next year. When she came back, she went to work at Matsqui. It's a medium security prison. So she worked at what they call the regional psychiatric hospital within Matsqui. And that's where she first came in contact with the inmate population. I believe that they were yes, it was a male only institution, or at least the group she was working with.
Did you ever ask her, like, why do you want to work with inmates? So it's a very different kind of calling than helping people with mental illness and psychiatric. There's a lot of psychiatrists. There's a lot of people out there that do one-on-one help and counseling and things of that nature. What do you think led her to Matsqui?
Honestly, truthfully, I'm not sure. Other than it probably was a challenge for her. I can see her wanting perhaps a challenge that represented a different kind of psychiatric nursing than she would have been practicing at Tranquille or at the wards in Essendale. So a different type of person with a different set of needs and
like these inmates, they're marginalized. They are in there for a reason. She wanted to make a difference in someone's life if she could sort of help them through. I feel, so far from what you've told me, she gained a lot of education in a lot of different areas where she could pivot herself in working with developmentally delayed, adults and psychiatric sort of platforms, if you will. And she tried this and she tried that, and it led her now, like you said, leading up to her first inmate interactions, and then how long was she there for?
She was at Matsqui for, I would say, maybe a year and a half. And then I had just started university at SFU, and again, this was some time ago, but SFU was one of the very first institutions that accepted what they called mature students.
Right.
Now, a mature student was anybody who was like over the age of 19. So I started, and I was so enchanted with the whole experience. I thought it was fabulous. So I actually convinced her I said, you really should come to SFU and get your degree in psychology or whatever it was. And so she agreed, and so she started in 1967. And she got her bachelor's of sociology and psychology, so she had a double major, and she did so well. She had an honors in both, and immediately following her getting her degree from SFU, she decided that she wanted to continue on. She was eager to get even more education. She thought education was literally transformative, which we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it would certainly benefit her in her chosen profession. And so she did. And then she went to UBC. You know, as soon as she graduated, then of course she could apply to this kind of position that required that level of education, and of course her skills and her experience really made her so valuable within this kind of institution.
Right.
She knew what to say. She knew how to say it. She knew how to reach these actually hardened. Lots of them are quite hardened criminals.
Yeah, it takes a lot of compassion too, doesn't it?
Certainly did.
Yes, yes. And so now she's doing that. She's graduated. She sounds like she's been in a lot of different schools, a lot of education, a lot of degrees, and that's amazing. And I'm sure you're her younger sister. You're looking up to her. Were you quite close?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes.
There were
That's
only two of us.
just two of you. So you're watching her and her steps and what she's doing, and you're doing. I'm just curious. Out of just on a side note, what did you take at SFU?
I took education.
Education. Okay, okay. It's amazing where life takes us, right? And so she's doing all of this, and she's wanting to get back into working with inmates because she feels that she could reach them, and she had a way about her, as you said, and everything else. So now let's get to, in terms of, where did she sort of come and go with regards to these facilities? She didn't go back to Matsqui, did she?
She might have gone back for short periods when she was going to university, because Mary was actually loath to borrow any money from anybody. So
she loathed borrowing money. Oh, she worked to get herself through school.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
She was determined not to have any
debt. Right.
Okay.
So this is building up a lot of character about Mary and the kind of human that she was, and she wanted to help these people that were behind closed doors, behind bars, hardened. Let's be really honest. Like, you don't go to Matsqui because you stole from 7-Eleven. You're going to Matsqui because you committed a pretty serious crime. And so she might have toggled back and forth, but then she landed a job in New Westminster at the BC Penitentiary. Okay, and so now she's there. Let's take us to what happened in the day, and all of those kinds of things, if it's okay with you.
Sure. You can see here, this is, if you know New Westminster at all, you will recognize this particular building. It still exists. This is the gatehouse. So this is the only remaining building from this huge complex. It was I think 65.5 acres of land.
Wow.
With cell blocks and also everything. It was a real community. I mean,
right.
Basically it was a community. And there were about 600 inmates there at the time.
Okay.
So this would have been, this was, a very responsible job. At the time in June 1975, Mary had 60 inmates on her caseload, and she was so much loved by the inmates. They absolutely adored her. In my book, I have some letters that they wrote to her that were in her possession.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, because she wasn't a pushover. She wasn't a pushover at all. She was very strong, very principled, very professional, but she she had a heart, and I guess that's what. Not that other people don't have hearts. It's just that she was able to react to their needs with some emotional and very compassionate a response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're at June the 9th, 1975, and it was a very warm June morning, and Mary went to work as usual. She arrives at her office, which was in a classification building. So it was like a series of trailers in a long row, and they housed all the offices of the classification officers.
Mm-hmm.
So the inmates would come down from the cell blocks and pass a guard at the entrance and give them, their permission. They had to have a permission slip, which was supposed to be an invitation by one of the classification officers to come down for a meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
So on this particular morning, 3 of the inmates from the penitentiary, one, his name was Andy Bruce, the other was Dwight Lucas, and the third was a man named Claire Wilson. Andy Bruce was an Indigenous inmate, and he was quite young. He was 26, but he had a very serious charge. He was convicted of murdering I think she was a dancer. I have to look back at that again, but it was a very serious crime, and he was in for probably a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Mary saw something in him. She felt that he was so young that he could be guided in a way to a better life.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
she really did. She saw something in him. And she thought that because he was an intelligent young man, and she thought, well, he's already showing some signs of leadership.
Right.
That he personally could take what he was naturally good at and passionate about and do something good with it. And so she thought that maybe he would be able to be a spokesperson for the indigenous prisoners, and so she basically I think she was starting to almost give him some sense that he may, be able to do something of value. So that's where she was with him. And anyway, on this morning, the three men presented their slip, which had been forged, by the way. Mary didn't have any reason to meet with Andy Bruce at that time. And they came in and they were carrying shivs, I guess. And they went down the corridor and started pulling out all the officers and shouting at them to get down to, herding them down to the end of the corridor and then down to the basement, which is where they ended up being. And Mary was one of them who was caught up in it. So classification officers were just basically in this room and not knowing what was going to happen. And Andy Bruce came in and he said something about, I want like a principal hostage. And because Mary knew him and they'd been talking a lot, and he'd worked with her on an event she had the 2 weeks before, which was called a Community Awareness Day. Now this is where Mary was really unique. She said, well, since you can't leave the prison, let's bring the community into you. And that's exactly what they did.
Mm-hmm.
So with Mary as being the coordinator, she had Andy plus other inmates who agreed to take a role in organizing this day.
Right.
And the idea was they could bring their families in, their friends, girlfriends, for a kind of banquet. And that's what they did. And it was a great success. Everything went off without a hitch in spite of the administration, not the administration, but the guards. The guards did not like this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, Mary agreed to be the principal hostage. She said, I will. And so they basically took Mary out to the anteroom, and there was Bruce and Dwight Lucas, and they were the ones who basically stayed outside. And so beyond the outside, there was another door, and every time any of the prison officials would come to speak with the inmates, Andy would actually take Mary and hold her in front of him as a human shield. And that happened like frequently throughout the course of the 41 hours. There was this constant back and forth, back and forth.
So 41 hours, we're in the 40th hour. We're getting very close to the end of this hostage takeover. And from everything that you've shared, it wasn't, you weren't surprised in some ways, I'm sure. An unfortunate situation by all means, but that she would have put herself forward, and she wanted to save the lives of the other people. And that's why she did what she did. So what happened in that last hour?
It was at 1 o'clock in the morning. And suddenly, about five of the classification officers decided that they were going to try and get out of the vault. And so the vault door was open just about this much, and they could see Dwight Lucas with his head. He was in a chair, and he was basically sleeping, and his head was against that space.
Mm-hmm.
Again, facing away from them into the little anteroom, right?
Right.
And so they decided they were going to try and knock him out. So they pulled up a tripod. It was on the floor in the vault, and they tried to smack him on the head, and they did, but he didn't go down. He didn't go down, and so they shut the door on these people, and one of the people who were at the door, one of the prison personnel, prison officials, started yelling for this tactical squad of prison guards, made up of prison guards, to basically respond. And so they came down the hallway, looked through the windows, and saw Mary in front of Andy Bruce. He pulled her in front of him, and they started shooting. And I've heard from various people that Mary said, don't shoot. But they clearly were not listening. And she died. She was killed.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes, it's a very, very tragic story. I almost feel like we need a part 2 of this, but I do want to get to your book signing at the chapters in Coquitlam. Can you give us those dates, please, Margaret? What are those dates?
The book signing is on Saturday, April 1st at 2 o'clock until 4, possibly later. And I'm a part of a larger group of authors, all local authors.
Yes.
Who are writing BC history.
Okay.
And that's going to happen The whole weekend is from March 31st, the Friday, then Saturday, April 1st, and Sunday, April 2nd.
Okay. Great, great. So hopefully we will see you there. It's the chapters in Coquitlam, just off of Lougheed Highway. Today we spoke to author Margaret Franz, and she spoke about the tragic death of her sister. And with all of that, I had so many more questions. If you have a chance, pick up Between Blade and Bullet. I know that I will. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Cathy Cena.